Well, good morning to anybody who may be listening. And I'm testing my new phone today. It arrived yesterday. I got a cheap one, but it's the same make as my previous one, and I think it's pretty good. Whether I'll be audible or not, I have no idea. I was looking more deeply into this matter of the difference between the 1611 and the most widely used translations of the authorized version. This is quite an important matter, I think. It could be quite an important matter if I'm right about this. I went and had a look at the Coverdale Bible, and that gives a capitalized God in 2 Corinthians 4:4. But the 1640 Diodati doesn't, and that's curious. Now, the Diodati was first published in 1604, and I don't currently have access to the 1604 text. But I wonder whether that was changed. But again, it's an Italian Bible, and I'm always a little bit cautious because of the closeness of that wicked reign in Rome and its great influence over the lives of the Italian people. But if it were to be true then that the 1611 was the one that was blessed, that version, then we have to consider things like spelling. And could it be that the Lord is telling us that as long as we're clear, it doesn't matter how we write a word? There's to avoid intellectual pride, you could say, which is a common problem, as everybody knows. Once you start to know a few things, you might start to think that you know a few things, which is dangerous because it will dissuade you from inquiring of the Lord and lead you to rely on your own resources. So perhaps the differences in spelling have an instruction. The word ought, I discovered recently, is spelt A-U-G-H-T and O-U-G-H-T, with both meanings in the authorized version. Ought as in nothing, and ought as in you should do something. Men ought always to pray and not to faint. That's the one that I would consider correct, because it's spelled O-U-G-H-T. But you will find A-U-G-H-T with the same meaning in I think in all authorized versions. I can't imagine that would be different in the 1611, although I don't have it with me in the workshop because, it's a bit unwieldy. So maybe every single revision has masked a teaching. It's a possibility. If the blessing of God was verily placed upon that book. Now, we're dissuaded from thinking that by the story of the first printed edition of the authorized version containing or omitting the not in the commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. And so it became known as the Wicked Bible. But that's a story. And the storyteller has been weaving narratives perhaps since 1611. That is a possibility. I know I'd already mentioned that. Of course, it could be. It seems so unlikely that such carelessness would be in the hand of the faithful men who prepared the typeface, it's a very, very serious omission, and that nobody saw it. No, this is the hand of, this is one of those psyops, isn't it? They've got in there, they've done something, and they've made claims. So, you know, if the 1611 printed version is the Bible, then also we do have to address the matter of the Apocrypha, which it contains. I'd started reading through the Apocrypha, and I'd left off when I got into the Wisdom of Solomon, not because it was dull, but because I preferred to concentrate on the 66 books in the end. And I'd read Bel and the Dragon, and it seemed silly to me, that story. So I'd sort of dismissed the Apocrypha. But there is value, certainly. You know, I'd read Esdras, and that was very good indeed. And then you've got, you know, there are some very valuable books in the Apocrypha. But they need to be read, I suppose, with, you know, they're testing our faith, if you like. And you know, the more you read the Word of God, the more you will see any case where they depart and question them. But one thing that I think is greatly ignored in the Christian walk, as it were, whatever you might call it, among believers, or among, no, not believers, because if you believe, you know this, but it's the importance of knowing your enemy, getting to know your enemy, who we're meant to love also. And I was reminded of this reading the Louis Theroux, or listening, perhaps, no, reading the Louis Theroux account of his meeting with Jimmy Savile, the famous, very wicked sexual abuser of children and of even corpses, assisted by the royal house of this country, to our shame. And Louis Theroux interviewed him in his home in the north of England, and I watched the interview. It's very good, and it's also chilling as well. Of course, when Theroux interviewed him, his wickedness had not been revealed. It was suspected, but nothing had come out publicly. And Louis Theroux was ruminating on the fact that he'd warmed somewhat to this man in the years following this kind of hallmark interview. He'd gained more of an understanding, I suppose, of the man, and was prepared to let it go almost. And I think that's understandable. And then, of course, the wickedness is revealed, and he felt ashamed of himself that he'd had this relenting in relation to the man. But Jimmy Savile was a very charming man. He had this ability to draw people in. And, you know, I certainly don't think Louis Theroux is guilty in any way, but he certainly helped us to know our enemy, and he has personally come to know that enemy. Whether that's led him to the Lord or not, that's another matter. But we do need to know these people and understand how they tick, and how they're, because then we can see how they are likely to act, and we can arrange our walk in accordance with that understanding. We're to act in accordance with the Lord. This is the matter. And it can't be done by rule following. You have to be ever so careful, I think. To give an example of how it is for me, and perhaps it's like this for everybody, but I'm wondering whether I might squander my dwindling resources on a flagpole and the flag that's also known as the butcher's apron, which is the Union Jack. And it's the flag of my country, of course. And there's been a lot of talk of flagging recently because flags have been going up. But when they go up in the neighbourhood, they identify you as who you are and the things that you're likely to believe. I'm identified already by my face, actually. I live in a Muslim neighbourhood, mainly. But raising a flag is proclaiming it openly. Now, I thought about it and, I've been meditating on it for some time because there are different aspects to it. I'm exposing myself, and there could be a measure of risk in doing something like that, because there are some thugs around, I'm sorry to have to say, lawless thugs who really fear no retribution, no legal retribution, because they are protected by the law, while because of my race, I have no such protection. I will bear the full weight of any law that can be brought against me for things that I do that might offend this understanding. This is the wickedness of the laws in Britain. To have a two-tier justice system is really quite disgusting and so profoundly unbiblical. People don't understand the law. They don't know the Bible. There was a discussion when a young lady who was, I suppose, objecting to right-wing narratives had published a verse from Leviticus, was it, saying that how we should welcome and be kindly to the stranger that lives among us. And there is such a verse, I can't remember exactly which one it was, rebuking really the speaker or speakers. And I was moved to add under her comment the verse that says, there shall be one manner of law for ye and for the stranger which is in thy midst. That really shows that her argument is, well, it's not wrong, but it needs to be tempered. We have to read the whole Bible. Love thy neighbour isn't the full story. And we have to understand how we can do that also. To allow our neighbour to proceed in deception and to walk towards his certain destruction isn't really loving him, is it? Anyway, that's enough ranting. I don't know whether this new system will work, but I hope it does. And I hope you all have a blessed morning, whoever you may be. Well, there's nobody, I guess. But the flag issue, there was something I wanted to add with it. Yes, there's the negative side of it, but there's the positive side of it also, because I'm sending a signal to those few of my brethren who still live in the area, and it will hearten them to see this, because whether they admit it or not, they are feeling isolated. So that's in favour of doing this thing. And I think the Lord will allow it. I don't know whether my own timid nature will allow it, because I know that I'm going to attract criticism. I'm sure my daughter and my sister would be critical. They say it's a symbol of hate to fly the flag of Britain. What have we come to? But I'm so heartened, because the Bible does teach, the power of a righteous man, the power of those who would turn to God and act in accordance with his holy commandments, casting aside all self-aggrandizement, is it called, and just doing as the Lord commands. But doing it, avoiding any kind of piety. Why should you be pious? You're naked and wretched without the Lord. So, it's just the hand of the Lord doing that stuff through you. But you do have to pray and not to faint, and, to inquire of the Lord. Of course, I'm sure everybody does. You read the Bible and you bring your predicament to the Bible as well, and the Bible will provide answers. You'll be taken to them if you trust in the Lord. The Lord knows where to open that Bible, actually. We all know that. God bless today.